Uber and Lyft announced that they're pulling out of Minneapolis and essentially putting a combined 10,000 drivers, out of work. Why? Because the Minneapolis City Council, in its infinite wisdom, has mandated that rideshare drivers be paid the local minimum wage of $15.57 per hour.
That's not going to fly.
Well, it's not going to fly for Uber and Lyft, so you're not getting a rideshare ride in the city of Minneapolis. Now, this is not dissimilar from Chicago, with BLM Brand's insistence on phasing in the ever-increasing minimum wage for tipped workers. You think the city council and BLM Brand, in their infinite wisdom, controlled by the new Marxists, as they both are, you don't think they'll apply these same mandates to rideshare drivers? I mean, they'll apply it everywhere they can. It's not dissimilar. It's not dissimilar to what California did too, with their refusal to, the treatment of rideshare drivers not as ICs but as employees. That legislative maneuver. So it's just more of the disintegration of the city. Cities, plural, I should say, because as we know, you can put the mayor of Minneapolis and the mayor of Chicago and the mayor of New York and into Indianapolis, into Minneapolis, and the mayor of Chicago to Memphis to New Orleans. Pick a major metropolitan area with more than 300,000 people. Interchangeable politicians because they're pursuing the same policies.
So you think it'll happen here?
And so the same disintegration is going to occur. Well, it is happening here. I mean, it's not. It's like, when is it going to happen? It's happening.
Well, no, I meant with Uber and Lyft rideshares.
Well, why wouldn't
They're
it?
going to make a demand that they make minimum wage.
Why wouldn't it? Now, maybe, I mean, we saw this in Seattle. Maybe once somebody sees a real cost being paid, that there'll be a little bit of pushback from the affected parties, like Seattle wait staff that revolted against the increase in the minimum wage for them in Seattle because after it was implemented, they were taking home less money.
Yeah.
But it just, people have to be personally punished to a great extent in metropolitan areas before there is any real pushback. And in Chicago and Cook County, it seems like the only thing that can really generate a sustained response is if you increase taxes on pop. That's about that. This is about the closest thing to a revolt in the last 50 years we've seen in Cook County.
Well, that and then the illegals that are taking over our public spaces. There's a big revolt on that too.
Right, but the difference between the illegals and the pop tax that Tony imposed is the pop tax was repealed. The sanctuary city designation, sanctuary county, sanctuary state designation, the expenditure of public resources on persons in this country illegally, that's not stopping.
No, that's not going away anytime soon. It's our new normal unless we vote this people out of office.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Chris Whalen. He is an investment banker out of New York and the author of books, the editor of the Institutional Risk Analyst. Chris, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. Good morning, Amy.
So how's it going in New York? I know where Eric Adams made some noise a couple weeks ago about, maybe we should slightly amend our sanctuary city declaration to say, except for violent offenders in this country illegally, and on that score we can work with ICE, but I don't know if that's going anywhere, or New York is going anywhere. But New Yorkers seem to be intent on going somewhere. I saw a survey the other day that 60% of Manhattan wants to leave.
Yeah, especially if you have young children. It's not a very good venue. Yeah, I've been going through Bob Caro's biography of Robert Moses, which tells you about progressive New York, and we're kind of undoing all of that. We're going back a century, the kind of chaos and unrest in the streets, insecurity, all the bad words, right? So, we live up in Westchester County. We left New York in 2021, and this is kind of a good compromise. We still have access to the city if we need it, but you don't want to be there all the time because it's dangerous. If you're in the box between 14th Street and 59th Street at night, it is a really dodgy situation. And they're trying to get the police back on the subways and everything else because they have to, because there's so much violence. But I just think it's going to be very dicey to make it work unless we get a change in political leadership, and that's not going to happen.
Do you have any shelters there with illegals in your county?
In Westchester County, I'm sure there are, probably down county in White Plains and areas where they have the facilities. We're at the top of Westchester County. I could walk over the Bear Mountain Bridge if I have to. So, the city is a mess, and we have a constitutional right to housing. You got to remember that New York is the lead progressive state when it comes to giving stuff away at public expense. And so people show up and they say, hey, give me housing. Eric Adams has a problem because he gets sued if he refuses to give them housing. But, you walk around Grand Central, you see the Latino illegal immigrants hanging outside the Roosevelt Hotel smoking dope and, assaulting people. They've been systematically going around the city, engaging in very organized criminal activities. So you wonder, who are these people? Were they really refugees, or were they just organized criminal gangs who came into the United States and are now living at our expense?
And there was this story out of Brooklyn or Queens, it was, of a squatter woman.
I saw that. That was great.
A woman inherits this house. Adele Andalaro inherits this house, and she, from a parent who had passed away, she is going to sell it, and she finds a guy or two guys living in there. She tries to get them out, and she gets arrested for unlawful eviction. So then we find the story developing yesterday, New York Post reporting. Some neighbors, of course, knew this was going on. And then when they saw the story of her getting arrested, they came over, and they're the one guy saying, I'm just trying to get some answers of why they think they live there. What you really have is, some people getting a little edgy and the prospect of more vigilantism. And this is what happens when you turn your community over to people who don't play by the rules, as they say. And this is how it's characterized, too. So not just that story, which I know is a longstanding policy in New York, just like it is in Chicago with the squatters' rights nonsense, but also Daniel Penny. So Daniel Penny's back in court. This is the characterization of ABC News of Daniel Penny. Former Marine Daniel Penny to stand trial in October for choking homeless man to death on New York City subway. Is that really what the story was? I mean, it sounds like he just did this, cavalierly for no particular reason, rather than intervening to protect other passengers on that train and trying to restrain this individual who is behaving erratically with no intent, obviously, to kill him. But this is how it's characterized when you intervene on behalf of your fellow man to stop somebody from violating their rights. And it's the same thing here. The person who's playing by the rules, who has the deed to the property, she gets arrested. The person trying to stop somebody who is endangering other people's safety, he's the problem. It is 180 degrees, and until you reverse that, fully reverse it 180 degrees, I don't see much hope for any of these big cities.
Well, of course, but remember, this started with a progressive intent, a positive intent to help people. Many of those homeless people, many of whom you don't ever see, Dan, they live underground, okay? It's like Las Vegas. You would be astounded at how many people live underground in New York that you never see, except when it rains. So, originally we had facilities to help people that had mental problems, for example, and that should not be on the street. Now we house them on the subway because the progressives, including Mr. Cuomo, discovered that it's too expensive to provide these services, especially when you have an economy where the wealthy and the business community are leaving. They've been invited to leave, right? So who's going to pay for all of this? And the answer is they can't. So the great progressive state, New York, has been slowly getting rid of all of the issue is you don't yet have a catalyst politically in the city that says we've had enough. And in the 70s, that started in the black community, ironically enough, with Mayor Dinkins, who I knew. He was a good friend and member of the Lotus Club. And I think that, you know, until you have that kind of indignation and anger on the part of urban residents, you're not going to have change. That's it. We flipped politics upside down, you know. Remember 100 years ago, we would have been talking about the rise of Tammany Hall. But the Irish and the Italians and everybody else that were part of that group, including my family, wanted order. They wanted a nice city. They didn't want degeneracy, right? Now we have the opposite. We have progressive politicians who don't really have a political base, but the cities have been abandoned. So these people think they can do whatever they want. Look at you guys with the, you know, the referendum you just had on the transfer tax. You know, to God. So they think they can pay for stuff with these punitive tax programs, but no, people leave. They just get up and go. And that's what's going to kill this. It really is. So northern tier cities, I think, are in a big problem for long-term historical reasons. You know, I wrote about this in my Ford book, but also for short-term reasons, COVID, other changes, right? We just had a 40% discount print on a rent-stabilized building in Manhattan. Think about what that says about all the banks in Manhattan that own that paper. Okay, 40%. Right? That's what the progressive mentality has done to New York. And by the way, Marty Grunberg, the chairman of the FDIC, is getting sued by one of the buildings that had a loan in the old Signature Bank portfolio. And, you know, he has no intention of selling those loans. He's going to just keep them inside the FDIC's bank insurance fund. It's progressive politics. Right?
When do you think Letitia James is going to move into 40 Wall Street? Seize Trump's properties.
Well,
he hasn't.
look,
till
again,
Monday.
the Donald often suffers from self-inflicted wounds, but I think he's going to win in November. The numbers are actually better this time around, much better. And Biden is just fading away. If the Fed doesn't do something by June, I think, you know, Biden is really cooked. Look at gasoline prices. You guys were just talking about that.
Yep.
You know, that's the pain point for Americans right now.
Well, the expectation is from this week's activity that and Jay Powell's pronouncements that the market still believes 3 rate cuts that are in the offing this year. What do you think?
Depends on the numbers. If we get a print that shows inflation rising again, they'll wait. The big change that's coming from the Fed is kind of May, June. They're going to slow down the shrinkage of the portfolio. Why? Because the federal debt is growing. I asked a funny question on Twitter yesterday, which got all the economists excited. I said, is there a ratio between the Fed balance sheet and the total federal debt? Do they like have a number in the back of their minds at the Fed? And the answer is kind of, sort of. You know, you ask questions like that and you never get a real answer. But it was funny, I was driving by the Fed building. I was just down in Washington this week, meeting with some people on the Trump transition team. And they're building at the Federal Reserve Board like, you know, I don't know what we're going to do, launch space shuttles from there or something. You know, this is the most influential and important institution in Washington. And you can't believe what they're doing on Constitution Avenue. It's like they're building a city between the two old Fed buildings. It's very funny.
Well,
no lack of money in Washington.
well, right. I mean, that's where the printing press is, and they're going to need it because the big guy's 2024 federal budget proposal is $7.3 trillion against a backdrop of $35 trillion in debt and another $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities.
I think what's going to happen ultimately is that when we hit the wall and Congress is forced to do something on spending, they're going to end up coming up with a national sales tax. And then the fight will be over getting rid of the income tax, which, of course, will drive the progressives insane. But that's the only way you could fund this country. You have to tax sales. You can't tax income because everybody hides their income.
So we're going to go full. We're going to go full Europe, and there'll be the left proposing a VAT tax and fighting any tax relief on the other side, on the work side.
Correct. So by rights, we should get rid of the corporate income tax. We should limit any, income tax for individuals to a punitive level for billionaires, and just basically fund this country off of revenue from the point of sale. The only thing that makes sense. But we'll get there. Remember, the old Hemingway quote: "How did you go broke? Little by little, and then all at once."
The sun also rises. I remember it well. But the sun is setting on big city America, and maybe America too, if we're going to go full European malaise. Chris Whalen, investment banker, chairman of Whalen Global Advisors, author of Ford Men: From Inspiration to Enterprise, and editor for the Institutional Risk Analyst. Christopher Whalen, thanks as always for joining us.
Have a great day.
You too, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
And Doug. To celebrate everyone who's customized and saved hundreds on car insurance with Liberty Mutual, we got a savings siren that goes off every time someone saves. There it is! It's a really more savings, which really... Okay, a lot of savings. Little annoying now.